Good morning. That legislative session is moving right along. And just thought we'd take a look at some trends, some early trends. Things are different than they've ever been before. When you're looking at what's happening out there, when you were out there before, what do you think about the trends? What does that tell us?
Yeah, well, one of the trends, unfortunately, that I wanted to bring up this morning was the trend of still continuing to lose people to COVID-19. Just want to offer my condolences to Representative Josh West for losing his father and then close family friend of ours, Dr. Andrew McCamey, in the last couple weeks. Just reminding everyone to be safe out there. As far as early trends in the Capitol, man, we are really moving fast this year. It seems faster than normal. A lot of bills flying through committees right now, getting ready to put a lot of work on the House floor, which our majority floor leader here will have to start increasing his workload when that happens, and a lot of bills on the Senate floor as well.
There are differences than in the past, especially since you've been there. What can we, when people on the outside looking at what's happening there, get an idea about?
Well, what I would say is we definitely are off to a fast start, because constitutionally our session meets from the first Monday in February to the last Friday in May. This is actually the shortest session we could possibly have, and that doesn't bother me. We do, as Ronald Reagan said, we do not suffer from too few laws. But you also had some things in the House that really shook things. Leader Josh West, as my friend said, his father passed away of COVID. Our prayers are with him. And we're trying to deal with all those personal things that go on while at the same time really hitting the ground running. Committee chairs are doing a phenomenal job. There's lots of action going on at the House, so we're off to a quick pace start.
Fast and Furious version, Humpty and Jillian so far. All right. In the old days, it was Democrats, Republicans. They were the ones that you had the fights and the discussions with at the state legislature. Now you've got different levels inside of caucuses. You have rural versus urban. You have all sorts of issues. What's worse these days, or what's more prevalent these days? Stuff happening inside the Republican Party or between parties?
Well, what I would say is none of it's worse. I would say a little bit of friction in a democracy is a good thing. If men were angels, there'd be no need for government, and men are not angels. What we need is that level of friction. But mostly what happens at the Capitol tends to be a rural-urban divide right now, and we need to remember each individual there represents their area. I represent House District 90. My interests as an Oklahoma City representative and the interests that I push are sometimes different than what happens in rural Oklahoma. However, I said this on the news the other day, and I stand by it. We've got to have policies for all Oklahoma. Urban Oklahoma can't succeed and rural fail, but rural Oklahoma can't succeed and urban Oklahoma fail. We've got to divide that gap and do something that's good for all of the state.
Your thoughts?
Well, I think generally, if you're thinking about partisan politics, you're probably thinking more along the lines of cable news shows. And perhaps even at our federal delegation, they seem to be a lot more partisan. Partisan level here in the state of Oklahoma, I'll agree with my colleague. I think a lot of those issues boil down to rural versus urban divides. And what we need to make sure that we're doing as a state and as elected leaders is making sure that we're not picking those winners and losers. We're making sure that we're enacting policies and doing things that are going to be in the best interest of the state in the long term. Not just what's happening right now, but what's going to take place in the next 10 years, the next 20 years, and beyond.
Okay, speaking of winners, in our next segment, we're going to talk about what's good, what's bad out there at the Capitol, but you have to stay right here. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You see a lot of press, a lot of TV about different bills. Some seem silly, some don't. But let's just get right down to it. What are the culls out there this session that everybody, they're just stinkers and we really can't deal with these? What do you think lead the way?
You know, it's interesting. That's a fair question of the majority floor leader, but I'm going to answer it a little bit differently. You know, when you're looking at bills, there are about 3,000 bills that get filed per chamber. At the end of the day, about 200 bills to 300 max end up becoming law. You're talking about 10% of bills. Really, before I look at the culls, I would talk about the culling. The committee chairs do a great job of the Oklahoma House of passing good, serious policy that works for the entire state of Oklahoma. Sometimes you'll see some policy that comes out of committees that's only good for a certain segment of the state, but what I would say, it's better to look at bills. I look at the end of session. What does the final product look like? And we tend to pass some really good stuff. Doesn't get the same press, though, of some of the stuff that actually never even makes it out of committee.
Some people call it separate the wheat from the chaff, right? But the fact is that you have to do some separation out there.
Yeah, absolutely have to do some separation. I mean, we talked about this on the show a month ago, how many bills were filed, and I think we all acknowledge that a lot of those were just going to be press release bills. They were the kind that never had any intent to go through a committee, never had any intent to make it onto the floor. It was just for press release purposes. Well, we're past that phase now. We're into committees. I think a number of the election bills are not being heard and are getting moved out, and I think that's important for us as a republic in that we have really good election system here in the state of Oklahoma. As a matter of fact, one of the best in the country. And I like that outside, national politics about elections are not bleeding into what's best for Oklahoma. So some of those are getting cold, and I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a shout out to Paul Zierix. Okay, this safe system we have here. Okay, enough with the calls. What do you think the prizes are this session?
Well, there is some really good legislation that's going through right now. I think one of the things that I would talk about, that we've talked about on this show quite a bit, is there are a number of pieces of policy going through that deal with medical marijuana. We have had an influx of illegal activity on medical marijuana here in the state of Oklahoma, and there are a number of pieces of bills that are going through that are going to add the enforcement that's necessary to make sure that that industry can continue to thrive, but also be safe for the public. There are a number of bills that are going through right now that I think we'll be able to use in order to encourage more folks to move to Oklahoma and work here. Good pro-business types of legislation that I think if they move forward, it's going to be great for the state.
It's like Cal Ripken's streak. We are like 400 plus episodes talking about weed. What do you think, though, are the real prizes?
Well, I am going to disagree a little bit with my friend on the election stuff. We do not that we don't have great elections in the state of Oklahoma, we do. But the State House of Representatives has made that a priority this year, and you will see some strong election reform bills that come out that don't in any way hamper the ability to vote, but continue to tighten our process, look at anywhere it could be bad. If you don't have secure elections, you don't have a secure republic. So I think some great stuff is coming out there on the House side. I also agree, some really positive movement is happening on medical marijuana regulation. We heard that from the state. We are pushing that very, very hard. And then my bill passed out of the Higher Education Committee to start funding the degree programs that we need to really focus on workforce development. So those are some real wins that are coming out of the House side so far, and I'm excited to see where they go the rest of the way in session.
You predicted it, and it's happening about workforce development. Thanks for watching. See this again at news9.com/yearboatcounts and follow me on Twitter @MitchellTalks.